You could recall Dick Van Dyke as one of Hollywood's most cherished legends, the endearing soul of Mary Poppins, and the entertainer who brought joy to American audiences across eras. Yet, a hidden shadow exists that you've likely missed. At 99, he ultimately opened up and identified the 5 performers he privately loathed. Folks who had been his nearest allies, including a past romantic interest, before ambition and arrogance sidelined him from ventures he assisted in building and embarrassed him during his peak stardom. And the moment you discover their actions against him, you'll see precisely why he refused to let go of the bitterness. Number 1. Walt Disney. The advisor who permitted him to stumble. When you listen to Dick Van Dyke discuss the individual he despised above all, it's astonishing to learn who claims the primary position. Walt Disney personally, the figure who spotted his talent, the one who granted him his debut film role, the person others revere as a hero. That's precisely why this revelation stings, since Dick never anticipated betrayal from someone so near. What many admirers overlooked is that throughout Mary Poppins' filming, Dick wasn't regarded as the celebrity he is now. He battled for the opportunity. He pleaded with Disney for a chance to try out for Mr. Dawes Sr., and even paid out of pocket. Within the production house, whispers circulated that he was overreaching, that he didn't fit in a blockbuster. And Dick sensed that strain constantly. During each practice, Dick inquired if his dialect was effective or required tweaks. He yearned for guidance. Walt stood nearby, observing, providing zero input. Dick remarked afterward, "I hoped endlessly for feedback from anyone." But silence reigned. That quietude devastated him. Upon Mary Poppins' release, reviewers criticized him harshly. Articles mocked the oddest dialect ever tried on screen. Dick anticipated Disney to intervene, not with regrets, just clarification, merely to reveal the fact that Dick lacked adequate training, that he'd been abandoned to navigate it solo. But Disney remained mute. Dick always remembered that. He consistently acknowledged Walt for the break, yet he couldn't pardon him for abandoning him to suffer unaided. Number 2. Mary Tyler Moore, the romance that evolved into bitterness. If a single name causes Dick Van Dyke's tone to shift each time it's mentioned, it's Mary Tyler Moore. Not due to her disloyalty, but because she stirred emotions he buried for years. He once quipped that he couldn't pardon himself for the sentiments he harbored toward her, and that's where the conflict resided. As the Dick Van Dyke Show launched in 1961, the team noticed the spark right away. Dick brightened in Mary's presence, unlike with others. Staff playfully noted how his stance altered upon her arrival. And Mary, merely 25, vibrant, captivating, created that impact naturally. What outsiders missed were the evenings Dick returned home grappling with remorse, aware of his marriage and unable to dismiss thoughts of her. Certain instances intensified it. In a midnight practice, Mary messed up dialogue and burst into giggles. Dick chuckled as well, then halted suddenly, grasping his true feelings for her. That terrified him. Such emotions often lead performers directly to infidelity. Decades on, Mary stated openly, "The remarkable part is we avoided an affair. I always viewed it as a huge missed opportunity." That shared admission highlighted the authenticity of the strain. Afterward, Mary soared to success, accolades, acclaim, front pages. Dick observed her turn invincible. She emerged as a megastar while he played the role of the guy feigning indifference to his affection. That's why the grudge persisted. He resented his inability to be her ideal match and resented his ongoing longing for her. Number 3. Carl Reiner, the brilliant mind who abandoned him suddenly. Did Carl Reiner depart so quickly that the echo of the exit lingers after all these years? That's how Dick Van Dyke portrayed the instant their bond fractured. Outsiders thought their collaboration was ideal. Inventor and performer, intellect and appeal. But privately, a control battle brewed so intensely that Dick felt the pain well beyond the final takes. Dick joined the Dick Van Dyke Show as Carl's selected protagonist, but that selection waned rapidly. Colleagues recalled Dick subtly complaining over meals about every artistic choice needing Carl's approval. He confessed confidentially once, "I headlined a series that wasn't mine." That wasn't envy. It was restriction. The decisive event occurred during the new Dick Van Dyke Show in 1971. They had a novel format, and for the initial time in ages, Dick anticipated greater autonomy. Then CBS axed the notorious installment Carl penned on a delicate household issue. The executives freaked out. Carl erupted, and the following day, he failed to appear. Dick arrived on location and learned from an aide that his guide had resigned. That shame embedded itself profoundly. The program faltered minus Carl, and Dick sensed accountability for a fiasco he hadn't caused. In later years, they gathered for meals, grins, reminiscences, but the injury never mended completely. Dick honored Carl as an icon. Still, he couldn't erase that the person who molded his path also deserted him in the direst hour. Number 4. Rose Marie, the colleague who sensed overshadowed. The fourth entry on Dick's roster feels unique since the friction with Rose Marie lacked volume, but lingered constantly, brewing beneath each recorded chuckle and witty remark they shared. Rose joined the Dick Van Dyke Show anticipating to stand out as the key woman. She possessed the experience, the rhythm, the theatrical skills. To her, she'd merited that prominence well prior to any executive spotting Mary Tyler Moore. Dick appreciated that assurance. He valued it. But the dynamic altered once Mary's fame exploded. Team members recollected the transition clearly. Dialogues gradually assigned Mary additional heartfelt scenes, more slapstick, more opportunities to dazzle. Rose held back initially, but by the third month her demeanor during script sessions shifted. She ceased chuckling at humor not hers. She noted more aggressively in her pages. Certain evenings, she departed sans farewells to anybody, Dick included. The instance that solidified the grudge took place in season 3. Post-recording, Dick neared Rose to praise her ad-lib that drew strong crowd response. She interrupted abruptly and snapped, "It won't count. They script only to highlight her now." Dick lacked a response. She exited before he could reply. Oddly, Rose never despised Mary. She detested the sensation of being displaced, and as the star, she subtly faulted Dick for permitting the change without advocating for her. Yet after filming ended, the atmosphere chilled immediately. Dick confessed later that the strain sapped the pleasure from days meant to be enjoyable. Number 5. Phil Erickson, the associate who vanished without farewell. Phil Erickson stands as the one entry on Dick Van Dyke's roster without renown or industry clout. However, he's the one who struck the initial wound. Dick never glossed over it. Phil didn't merely depart, he evaporated, and that vanishing altered how Dick relied on others forever. Well before TV, prior to Mary Poppins, Dick was simply an eager youth anchoring a dawn broadcast in 1947. Phil entered that space, observed Dick fooling about with only a microphone and innate flair, and decided immediately, we ought to collaborate. It was the sort of proposal that transforms existence right away. Soon they performed as Erickson and Van, the cheerful mimes mimicking vintage tunes, crafting bits in tight-changing areas, and enduring multiple performances nightly like comrades in combat. Insiders noted Phil served as Dick's artistic guide. He instructed him on maintaining a stance, constructing a wordless bit, delivering humor silently. Dick informed a pal once, "Phil was the initial believer in my potential. That was reality." But it all shattered in 1953. Dick appeared for practice in Atlanta, attire neat, sequence learned. Phil's spot was vacant. Staff assumed delay. Dick held on. Then a crew member approached with a creased message. Phil had resigned, he wasn't returning. He quit entertaining. He'd already fled the area. That lone event tore something from Dick. The duo ended quietly, and Dick passed the subsequent years hustling via unsuccessful quizzes, minor cameos. Phil didn't shatter his spirit, he demolished his base, and Dick never reconstructed it identically. And now that you've discovered the 5 names Dick Van Dyke concealed for nearly 100 years, the disloyalties, the sorrow, and the events that almost shattered him, which surprised you the greatest? Which tale altered your view of these Tinseltown greats? Share in the comments, and remember to like, subscribe, and press the bell icon. Thanks for watching.